Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Bright Talk webinar on unleashing the power of operational data, taking an analytic approach to service automation. My name is Heath Ramsey, and I join you from ServiceNow, where I am the Director of the Customer Success Program inside the Analytics and Reporting Business Unit. So I work quite a bit with our customers at ServiceNow on the idea of business services and structured business services, and ultimately how to gain visibility into those business services so that they can make the right decisions about what to automate and what to invest in to make sure they're going to really get the return on their investment. And it's my pleasure to spend the next hour or so today with you talking about that. So we've got a lot of material to cover, and I'm going to go relatively fast, so make sure we get everything in there. But with that, we will go ahead and we will get started. So first of all, a little bit about ServiceNow, the enterprise cloud company. You may have heard of us. We are a very fast-growing company, and we made our claim to fame by replacing large legacy IT service management players in the industry. We've done a lot to help our customers consolidate dozens, sometimes hundreds, of fragmented and redundant help desks and other systems onto the cloud. And as part of that consolidation and as part of that structure, we then have a core foundation on which we can help our customers do modernization and transformation of their business services, not just within IT, but any business service within the organization. So things like human resources or security incident or customer service management, those types of things can all be done through ServiceNow. We are a global company. We have almost, or actually a lot more than 3,000 enterprise customers now, about 3,700 employees and major sites all around the world, with strong revenue growth. And that whole idea of modernization and transformation is really what we're going to be touching on today, because when you think about a business service and how you operate a business service inside an organization, you get a lot of data. But the question is, where do you store that data, and how do you actually take advantage of that data? So a little bit about me. This is my ugly mug up on the screen here. So a few interesting facts to let you get to know me a little bit better. First things first, I am a published author. You can search my name on Amazon or on Barnes & Noble or your favorite site, and you actually will come up with a hit. If you decide that I'm an awful presenter and that you want to be a little bit charitable and try to give me money, please do not purchase this book. It is seriously out of date, and it is not relevant. You can see that Novell Intranetware, that was Novell 4.11 for those of you who who are as old as I am. But anyway, so there's one thing about me. Second thing about me is that I am a graduate of Duke University, class of 1994. Please don't send the hate just yet. But I was a student there, and then I worked there in their IT organization for about 5 years afterwards. But interestingly enough, I was also a coach there in their athletic programs. I coached the women's volleyball team and the women's field hockey team, each for about 4 years in my tenure. So I have a lot of interest in what's going on at the Olympics. And in fact, I believe the field hockey finals and the volleyball finals are going to be going on over the next few days. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And our agenda today is really about the steps that are required to really unlock and unleash the power of the operational data in your environment. So we're going to be talking about structure, and then we're going to be talking about, once you have that structure, how you drive service improvement, because you're certainly going to get value with that. And then from there, we're going to get into broader concepts like how do you automate the right tasks and how do you drive self-service adoption in an organization, giving yourselves the data that you need to make those types of decisions. And then finally, we'll end with benchmarking and some real business value as well. So as I mentioned, very chock full of information, and we will get started here. Structure is really the most important thing. When we think about trying to unleash the power of operational data, it is the structure that we need to start with. If you have business services and you are trying to get people to work in providing a business service, these are your general stakeholders: requesters, fulfillers, service owners, executives, et cetera. And without structure, the way that they communicate with one another, emails, phone calls, a lot of out-of-band communication. And this out-of-band communication is useful for helping people to actually do work. But if you think about how much data is being passed in these emails and through these phone calls and then in spreadsheets and then potentially in PowerPoint presentations, it's all unstructured. And if you think about the amount of time and the amount of people and the resources that are required to actually make this go and then report on it, it's really very, very inefficient. That's where ServiceNow can help, and certainly that idea of a centralized platform and infrastructure It's less about trying to get people to communicate through traditional means, and it's more about when I have a business service that I want to publish, all I need to do is design a workflow. And then that workflow can go into my central platform. And then when somebody needs to request that business service, all that person needs to do is fill out a form. And that will contain all the mandatory fields and everything that I need in order to make the service go. And then because you have a workflow engine, you can get that routed to different places, multiple layers if you want to. And then ultimately, the fulfiller is going to be able to fulfill the request on the behalf of the person that needs the business service. So the promise of structure and the promise of this approach is consistency, it's repeatability, and because all these requests are flowing through the same system, you get data. Now, when all of your stakeholders are working in this way, everybody gets something out of it. The requester and the fulfiller get that transparency and prioritization, and your service owner and your executives get the productivity and the oversight that they're looking for because all the information is in the platform. But what you're left with when all this operational data and these records are in the platform is you've got a locked chest of information. There is so much data here that you can mine, but the question is, how do you get to it? And more importantly, this is a huge mountain of data. How do you actually make something out of it, and how do you gain insight both into the data and certainly how that data relates to the process? The mechanisms that you might use, things like a reporting engine. So ad hoc queries, standard reports, drill downs, things like that. Reporting will definitely help you understand what's going on with your data inside that platform. And then you probably are also looking for an analytics component. So not just the current state of the process or the current state of the records that are in that system, but what are the trends? Why is it happening? What's going to happen next? And ultimately, what's the best that happens? At ServiceNow, we have a solution that's called Performance Analytics that is integrated into the platform. And we certainly think that an integrated analytics solution makes a whole lot of sense because, one, you have a single source of truth. Everybody is keeping the information in the platform. And two, you have a single security model as well. So you don't have to worry about data being exported, security breaches, because all of your ACLs and all of your roles are preserved inside the platform whenever you're trying to access your operational data. So structure is very much step one. If you are at a place where you're trying to provide business services and you're trying to get to this holy grail of service improvement and data-based decisions, always start with the structure. And once you have the structure, you're going to have control of your data quality, and then you can drive improvement. So step two for us today is that continual service improvement and how we actually deliver it. For those of you who are very familiar with ITIL, you know that we can spend days and weeks and months on this topic and probably not come to any level of agreement over some of these things. And we have less than an hour at this point, so I'm going to boil it and distill it down into something very simple. Continual service improvement is doing more with less. So how do I improve my service quality in this structured communication mechanism while reducing the cost of service delivery? And as we talk through this, I really want us to put it into the mindset of something practical and something that we probably do on a daily basis, and that is the incident management process. Everybody goes back to the incident management process, right? It's everything that we do. But if you think about how you increase service quality in incident management, here are some of the things that you might be thinking about. Reducing your MTTR, making sure that you are minimizing the number of reassignments, making sure that you are not reopening tickets or cases, whatever it is about your process, because those are all things that are going to impact customer satisfaction in a poor way. And then on the cost side, you probably are even doing some things today to try to reduce cost to your organization as you're delivering this service. If you have an IT organization and you have tiers, level 1, level 2, level 3, where you've got a service desk and then an escalation group that's tier 2, and then your highest paid, most knowledgeable people are up at tier 3, that is an effort to reduce cost because what you're doing with your tier 2 and tier 3 people is you're trying to remove them from the process, and most of your incidents in this case are going to be handled by the people at your service desk, which are your generalists and probably some of your least paid employees who are just going to handle most of the volume. So what we're going to be talking about today is really how do you increase the customer satisfaction and reduce cost? Because once you have that structure, you can do that. The way that I like to think about continual service improvement is I always go back to the process. If we have some folks on the phone here who are process designers, this slide is catnip to you, like it is to me. We've got swim lanes, we've got flow charts, we've got decision points, we've got all sorts of stuff. And we know that when we design a process, we design it in two phases. We design it for efficiency, what's our optimal path, and then we design it for completeness to make sure that every case when the customer comes in on the lower left, ultimately that customer finishes on the lower right. So if we think about how people can traverse this process, you might have a path like this. This is what we want people to have, and this is the experience that we want them to get. And for incident management in this case, it really is about the service desk, because if the service desk can resolve the incident, then we get the optimal path for the customer. But this isn't only good for us, it's for our customers, it's also good for us as an organization. Because if you think about it, this is the least amount of time, the least amount of people, and the least amount of resources that are required to resolve this incident. All right, so not everybody at the service desk can know everything as much as we might want them to. So once in a while, hopefully, we'll get escalations. This is why we design for completeness. This is structure. And we get that escalation. The customer's still happy, so we're able to resolve that incident in this case. But organizationally, if you think about the number of people, the amount of time, and the resources that are involved, we've increased it. So there actually is a tangible cost to us within the organization. So a bunch of you out there may have seen the Lego movie a little while ago, and I'm going to tell you that unlike the Lego movie, everything is not awesome in incident management land. And sometimes you get this path through the process. And by the way, you're welcome for that earworm. It's going to be stuck in your head for the rest of the day. We've all been in this situation. I call it the meat grinder. We feel like we're being passed back and forth from person to person. We feel like we're having to state our case over and over again. Our issue isn't being resolved. This is a horrible, horrible customer experience. Now, organizationally for us, the amount of time, the amount of people, and the amount of resources that are required to handle this kind of incident, huge. This is high cost for the organization. So what does this mean? That whole idea of reporting and analytics and unleashing the operational data here, the reporting engine is going to give you a piece of it. The reporting engine is going to tell you the current state of your process, how many tickets have been reassigned, how many people might be getting this kind of experience currently. But it's the analytics that's going to tell you over time how many people are getting the optimal path versus the less than optimal path. And it's those analytics, it's understanding that history and that trend that's really going to allow you to understand how your process is performing and how you're actually going to be able to improve that process. All right, so let's talk about the business on top of this idea of continual service improvement. These are actual numbers. We did not make them up. This comes from the Help Desk Institute, a study that they commissioned a few years ago across North America, and they did an analysis to see where or how much it cost organizations on average to resolve incidents at different tiers within their organization, and you can see that here. And you will see that if even when we get that first escalation from the service desk up to tier 2, we're talking about potentially tripling the cost of an incident in the organization. So clearly, the more that you escalate, the more that it's going to cost you. And when we think about continual service improvement, what we want to do is shift left, meaning that we want the service desk to handle as many incidents as possible, and hopefully we can even shift down, provide self-service to users and drive that idea of automation so the cost to the organization is really just the cost of maintaining the systems. And this is the nirvana. This is the holy grail that everybody is after. But ultimately, how do we get there? Well, we get there with the data that's in the platform, but we also get there by understanding the concept of leading and lagging indicators. So a lagging indicator is something about a process that you measure. It's usually an output. If you are familiar with the incident management process, one of the lagging indicators that's classic, mean time to resolve. You measure at the end of the week, you measure at the end of the month, you measure at the end of the quarter, and you get a number. And hopefully that number meets whatever it is target you've set. And then you look at that number and go, it really would be interesting to know how I can make that number better. But the number by itself doesn't actually give you any of that information. So what you need to find in your processes to really unlock your operational data is this idea of leading indicators. and a leading indicator is something that's going to drive an outcome for you. One of the classic leading indicators for the lagging indicator of mean time to resolve is first call resolution rate. So I'm going to pull out my trusty red pen here. And you'll notice here, this corresponds to one of the decision points in my process. And in fact, this was that first decision point as to whether or not the user got the optimal path or whether they got escalated. We know that the more that we resolve at the service desk, the more people are getting the optimal path, which means that our mean time to resolve should be low. However, if my first call resolution rate starts going down, it means more and more of my tickets are being escalated up to Tier 2 and Tier 3, and I can fully expect that my lagging indicator, mean time to resolve, is ultimately going to go up. So that finding those classic pairs, finding those relationships within your process is really what's going to allow you to drive outcomes. And then once you have that, you can start measuring that in your operational records to start driving the outcomes that you want and the outcomes that you need. Unfortunately, it's not just about leading and lagging indicators, because if it was that easy, then the world would be perfect. We'd be able to identify all the different data points and pieces of information that we need. But ultimately, it does come back to people working the process. It comes back to our worker, it comes back to our service owner, and it comes back to our executive, and making sure that with respect to those leading and lagging indicators, that they are all working from the same data sheet. You don't want people exporting data to Excel or taking data off the platform and then transforming it for their own purposes. You may be running that in your own environment today. Have you ever been part of a meeting where somebody has spreadsheet A and somebody has spreadsheet B, and they spend 30 minutes arguing over whose data are most accurate? That is a big symptom of people having to export data and transform it in their own way, and they're not aligned. By keeping the data in platform, by pointing the reports and the analytics at that single source of truth, you're going to allow all of your stakeholders to see the same information, and more importantly, you are going to give them the data in a language that they understand. So you want your service owner to see trends around the cost and quality for the services that they own. You want your workers to be able to efficiently achieve their targets. What's set for them? How do they get to their bar? And then the executive, much higher level, needs data to make informed business decisions. So how does that person get the red, yellow, green across the organization? How does it translate into cost? How does it translate into customer happiness? All those different types of things that the executive wants to see. And that is really another goal of trying to make that data meaningful and unlocking the power of the data, because it needs to be in a language that people understand. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to tempt the Dark Angel of demos and actually show you some of this stuff in action in a live ServiceNow instance. So there we are right now, and we're going to continue the story of the three stakeholders. We've got our process owner. In this case, it's the incident process owner. We will have a service desk worker, and we will have the IT executive as well. What you're looking at first is a dashboard for a service owner. And what we want to provide to the service owner, things about all this data inside the platform, are some of those key leading and lagging indicators. And the first thing that you'll notice is that right here we have that mean time to resolve and that first call resolution rate right there together. And we're not waiting for the end of the month. We're not waiting for the end of the quarter or the week even to publish what the MTTR is. We're actually seeing it pretty much in real time. This is the value as it stands today. And here's the first call resolution rate. So my process owner can see immediately, is my first call resolution rate going up or down? And if it's going down, what potentially is the impact going to be to my MTTR? And this person can slice and dice the information and look at the same indicators across a whole bunch of different groups, depending upon how many groups you have in your organization, and seeing how the statistics pertain to each individual group. All right, so another classic pair here of leading and lagging indicator on incident management is my backlog versus my age of backlog. And this organization right here looks like that they decided, yeah, my backlog's getting a little bit too high. Let me start engaging in a backlog reduction process. Let me do meaningful work so that I can bring this number down. And they've gone from 761 to 422. So So it's a 35% reduction in probably about 5 weeks or so. But what we're seeing here is that we've got the average age that's increasing, and it looks like it's hanging out at about 13. So what I'd like for you to do, I'd like for you to take 3 seconds, and I want you to make a snap judgment. A snap judgment on whether or not this chart means something good or something bad for the organization. So go ahead in 3 seconds. Everybody got your answer? And of course the answer is, it depends. You can probably tell I was a consultant in my past as well. But it really does depend on what you're being measured on. And that's why unlocking the value of data needs to be related to what your business outcomes are. This organization, if they're measured on their backlog alone, they are doing a fantastic job. However, if they're measured on mean time to resolve, if they were to close out every single incident in their backlog today, their MTTR would jump from 3 to 13, which means that they would almost quadruple their MTTR. That's a pretty big surprise. And one of the things about processes and business performance, we don't like surprises, right? So this is where the analytics really comes into play in a meaningful way. So how did we get here? How did this organization get to a place where they've made progress in one way, but they're in for a really nasty shock as they continue to work this backlog? It all has to do with how people are actually working. Because what's probably happening as they're getting this massive reduction here, they're probably working their backlog in a way where they're closing the easiest and the newest tickets first. That's what the data here are telling us, because we see the backlog going down, but we see the average age going up. What we can do with an analytics solution and what we can do with unlocking the power of our data is see this trend developing right within the first week. And if we see the trend developing, we can change. We can change people's behavior. We can change how people work. So within the first week, we can tell people, hey, stop working on the new stuff. Go work on these incidents that are older than 30 days. Go work on these incidents, even though the SLA has been breached, because we need to work on this in the right way in order to drive our outcomes. And with that kind of insight, what you will be able to do is accomplish both goals at the same time. You can reduce the backlog, but you can do so in a way that's going to flatten this out and make sure that there are no surprises for your MTTR. So if I am a service owner and I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, I need to do a little bit more exploration. And you can. If you've got access to the information, you've got access to all these operational records, and you are building this information, you can get more advanced views. You're looking at something here that we happen to call a workbench widget, but it's a place for a service owner to come in here and get a little bit deeper into what's going on with the process and the process performance. So here you happen to be looking at number of open incidents, so we're still looking at the backlog, but it's now segmented out into the different tiers within your organization. How are things performing at the service desk? How are things performing at Tier 2? How are things performing at Tier 3? And with this kind of view, you can get a lot of great data points, great related data points, all on the same screen. So rather than trying to build additional reports or go from scorecard to scorecard or even system to system, you can pull all that information here together and get a really good picture. So you'll notice here that this is my number of open incidents at the service desk, and here's some good supporting indicators that help me understand how the service desk is performing. Percentage of incidents not updated in 30 days, 5 days, what's my first call resolution rate, and certainly you'll see that as I mouse over the main indicator here, all the information in my supporting indicators also updates. And I can fix it to a certain day, and I can drill down into various things. And if I want to look at not only the trend, but the operational records, because I'm in platform, all I have to do is click on the records button, and now I can see specifically the 113. I'll scroll down to the bottom here so that you can actually see that I have 113 incidents. I'm not lying. And if I happen to fix it on, say, March 15th here, which is the date, and 141, when I scroll down to the bottom, these were the 141 records that were open on that day. So the ability to get from strategic information all the way down to the operational record level, very important, especially as we're trying to do a little bit more investigation. What you have down here at the bottom of the screen is what we call a breakdown. And a breakdown just adds an additional dimension of analysis. And the breakdowns are important because they're going to give you insight into your processes that the top-level numbers aren't necessarily going to give you. Let's take this for example. Number of open incidents at the service desk broken down by priority. How many are critical, how many are high, etc. And I can see that I've got 8 open critical incidents at the service desk. Okay, 8 compared to 113 doesn't necessarily seem to be that high, and a traditional report will show you 8 out of 113. Okay, we're running at about a little bit under 10%, maybe like 8 or 9%, somewhere in that range. But what an analytics tool will tell you is that that number 8 is a historical high. So we have never seen in this organization a number of critical incidents that are open at any given time more than 8. So there's something going on in our process, something that we potentially want to take a look at, because we need to get our workers really attacking these tickets in a meaningful kind of way. And if I'm a service owner, I can come in here and I can look at other areas of my process, and maybe priority is important to me. I want to see what's going on with my high and critical priority incidents, especially as it's getting up into the higher levels of the organization. So again, you have the ability to look at a specific area of your organization should you want to, and you can look at the average reassignment times, 1.69. That actually doesn't seem very unreasonable for a ticket that needs to get escalated to Tier 3. But watch what happens when I actually click on the supporting indicator. My breakdown is now reflective of the indicator that's here, and I can now see that on average, when my tickets get to Tier 3, they are reassigned on average 5 times. So this organization, even though it doesn't look like it on the surface, suffers from what we call hot potato syndrome. It's, I got an incident that's open. Let me pass it over to this person. I think they can take care of it. That person can't. They send it to somebody else. Rather than actually analyzing and trying to figure out how people should work in order to be able to reduce this number, people are just throwing it around hoping that it gets closed. So this is clearly a problem in my process as well. And if I want to, again, this whole idea of being able to drill down from strategic to operational record information, very important. What you're looking at here, instead of trend information, is more operational record. And if I want to look at specific states to see the things that are on hold or awaiting user info, I can do that, have all sorts of interactive filters. You should be able to regroup and restock on the fly, go to various levels of visual drill down, and then you can get to the specific operational records in a very meaningful way. So instead of having to sift through hundreds or potentially thousands of operational records that both historically and currently open in this process, you can use the right visualizations for the right person to get specifically to the things that they need very quickly and very accurately. And you don't have to worry about being exported and worry about the security model as well. So that's our owner. And I mentioned that this is the story of 3 stakeholders. Let's go ahead and go over to now our worker. So what we're doing with the service desk worker, first things, we talked about leading and lagging indicators earlier in the presentation. Leading and lagging indicators are critically important, not just for the process performance, but everybody in the organization needs to know what those leading and lagging indicators are, and they need to know what to do when they see those indicators moving in a specific direction. What you're seeing here is the leading and lagging indicators for the process being presented to the service desk worker. And the numbers pertain specifically to the service desk, so they don't have the full process view like the incident process owner does, but they're seeing meaningful information, and they know how to react. They know that when the first call resolution rate is going down, that the NCTR is going to be going up, and they can be figuring out how they can make this number better. Does it mean writing better KB articles? Does it mean getting the right training? And we could drill down into that and see it by category, and there's a lot of information in there that would certainly allow an organization all the way up through management to invest in the right things so that we drive this number up and we drive the business outcomes that we're looking for. Likewise, we can give a service desk worker an operational dashboard. So what should they be working on now? How do we change their behavior? And if you remember from the incident owner, we were really concerned about high priority and critical priority incidents. So if we now want them to start working on critical priority incidents, they can come to a dashboard, click on the right filter, and here's the list of incidents that they really should be working. This is how we're going to address our problem. And right from this dashboard, we can get from that reporting and trend information all the way down to the record level. Again, integrated security model, so everything is only the people who can read and write to these records actually would have the ability to do so. Now think about analytics. Traditionally, analytics has been in the realm of the service owner and the executive, a handful of people in your organization who are actually looking at this information, trying to drive insight, and then communicating that to the rest of the organization. And we don't know how effective that is or not. But what if you could give analytics information to the workers to make the best decisions possible? That's really a key component of unlocking the value of your operational data. So we happen to be working a priority 1 incident here, and I'm looking at the business service that this incident is associated to. And if I want to get more information as a worker about what's happening with this business service, I can click on my analytics button. And now I can start to see volume. How many new tickets around this incident or around this business service have come in, say, in the last 28 days? What about close changes versus spikes in new incidents? Can we actually see specific dates where things have increased volume significantly? So now instead of waiting for an owner or an executive to try to process this analytic information, we've got workers. They can see it as it's happening, and they can start to collaborate with each other, and they can bubble up things that are happening within the environment probably before an executive or a service owner might actually get an opportunity to look at that dashboard. But not only that, they also have the ability to use this to make business decisions. So you remember hot potato syndrome, right? Well, how do we give the workers better data to make the best assignments? We're in a priority 1 incident. Here is where the incident is assigned to us, but perhaps we have the choice of assigning it to either the database team or the hardware team. Well, let me look at the information about the queue for the database team. Here's how many they have open. Here's how long it takes them to close. I can look at that same information for the hardware team. And now I'm looking at their backlog, and I'm looking at their close time. So as a worker, I can look across the various groups that I might assign this to, and I can make the best decision to try to get this critical priority incident resolved as quickly as possible, and hopefully bring down that number of average times of 5 to something significantly less. All right, so let's talk about our third stakeholder, which is our IT executive. And our IT executive, again, very interested in information that is higher level, probably across multiple processes related to the business outcomes. What you're looking at here is an example of how, using operational data, you can build things like index scores. You can build things like indicators across processes. So if my pillars of performance are customer experience, performance, and risk, I can have a consistent and objective number across all of my different processes that quantifies how we're doing. And then using that number, the executive can determine, well, are we doing well? Are we not doing well? How are we compared to yesterday, to last month, et cetera? And by making it quantifiable, we're removing the guesswork. We're removing the emotion. All of the data from the operational system, the business service, is being collected and built in such a way that we're getting this insight. And not only can you do things like index scores for executives, you can put it in a language that they really understand, which is cost. So let's say that you wanted to take those HDI benchmarks and you wanted to apply those to your operational business service, incident management in this case. You can actually start to do that, and you can give a different kind of insight to your executives. What's the average cost of an incident in my organization? What is the aggregate weekly cost? What is the aggregate monthly cost? What really is it costing me as an IT organization to run my incident management process? And of course, we saw before with the breakdowns and everything else, we can see that by priority, you can see that by business service, all sorts of different things here. So it really is about the visualizations and how you take this information and structure it so that you can present it in a way that people understand it based on their role, but still make sure that everybody's aligned. They're all working from the same data. All right. Continual service improvement, very important, because that's where you're going to drive that value. You're going to drive the business outcomes. Structure, step 1. Step 2, improvement. Step 3, how do we now take this information? We've got our processes. We've shifted left. How do we now shift down? How do we automate the right things in our organization? And how do we drive self-service adoption? Well, we need to go back to our chart here, our business flow, our business process. because what we want to do is to figure out what are the things that are going to allow our users to come in and be self-sufficient. What are their requests? What are their desires? What are their needs within the organization? So we're looking at things like self-service and automation and knowledge management and really figuring out how we can even, quote unquote, deflect from the service desk all the way back to the user. So I'm going to take you through another example using this data where you can see how we can take these records and how we can take this information and, again, tell a story through our different stakeholders here. So if I'm looking at average cost and I'm an executive, and now I come down to my breakdown and I start to look at this information by category. Those of you who are familiar with the incident management process know that in general it doesn't stand alone. You've got incident, you've got problem, you've got change, you've got request, you've got knowledge, you've got all of these things. But one of the big cross points of incident management is this concept of request. My users are requesting something, and hopefully that request can be resolved through a service catalog or some type of set of tasks that are automated instead of coming into my incident management process. So as an executive here, I know that this is the cost of my incident management process, but now I'm looking at a category of request. These are things that should be handled in an automated system, but for some reason they're coming into the service desk. And based upon my information right here, my requests that are coming to the service desk are actually higher than the average cost of everything else within my incident management process. So there's something failing about my overall IT infrastructure that is actually costing me money. I should be able to make that be that $5 thing that we talked about in the previous section, instead of having it be almost $90 a request that's coming in. So of course, an executive sees this, and what do? Well, I'm just going to say that things flow downhill, right? So the executive is going to go to the service owner and say, figure this out. Why are we not able to make the progress that we're looking for here? And now my service owner can go back into their data, and they can try to figure out what's going on. So we can create additional types of visualizations, additional types of dashboards that's going to allow people to really understand what they should be investing in. So that higher level insight, that higher level understanding. What you're looking at right here is the number of requests that are coming into the incident management process that are open. And you're looking at it across a few different dimensions. You're looking at it as volume. You're looking at it as age. And you're looking at it as MTTR. So it's how long does it take it to resolve, how long does it generally stay in our backlog, and how many of them do we have open? So if we're thinking about how do we address this request problem that's coming in, a knee-jerk reaction might be, well, let me go after the highest volume one. In this case, it's the business service called the U.S. Loyalty Club. And I can look at this, but I don't see this showing up in the top 5 of either one of my other columns. So what this could tell me, and I could investigate further, is that I've got a high volume, but it may not take us very long to accomplish. This may be something very transactional and very quick that if we invest thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in trying to automate this, are we going to get the return that we're looking for? And the answer is probably not. Likewise, we could look at a few other ones here. Here's a business service that falls into my age and MTTR, top 5. But again, this may not give us everything that we're looking for because maybe this happens only once a quarter. So again, if we're making that investment, are we going to get the returns that we're looking for? So what we want to find is one that has the volume, it has the age and the MTTR, and one that looks like it would be a decent candidate here is the corporate email. And if I want to now look at that corporate email and do a little bit more digging, you'll have to forgive me, I actually didn't go get my breakdown dashboard the right dimension. There we go. So I can do more investigation. And now, for example, if I wanted to see the number of open incidents, problems, and changes, and just make sure that my volume 11 is not a high, a historical high. And in fact, I can see 11 requests coming in for corporate emails, actually historically low, which means that even though I'm showing up on the top 5, this is something that our IT organization handles very frequently. we can drill down, go into this information. Again, the value of strategic trend information being in platform and really being able to get from strategic to record operational information quickly. And we can start to look at what kind of categories are coming in here into request. You'll notice that we've got a lot of account provisioning, and we've got a lot of password resets that are happening. So these are things that, if we automate them, and we can look at the cost of automation, and then we can relate that back to the volume and the cost that we're seeing, we know whether or not this is a good investment. And it's not just from the incident management perspective. If you think about password reset and account provisioning, that's lost productivity as well. So you know that you're getting a little bit of extra added value when you go down this road. So this really is about making data-based decisions. What are your operational records telling you that what you should be doing to really improve the service, but also do it in a very cost-effective and an efficient kind of way? The other thing that we can look at, if we've got all this operational information, is this idea of service adoption. So you might be investing in this really expensive system, self-service portal, knowledge management, whatever it happens to be. How do you know that people are actually using it? Well, because you've got all this information in one place, and you've got information about your users and how they're using your processes, you can start to link the use. What we're looking at right here is knowledge management and incident. Again, a few of those related processes. How many of your incidents incidents as a percentage are actually being answered through your knowledge base instead of going to the service desk? And right here we're looking at it's only about 11%. That might be good. That might be bad for the organization. And it all depends upon what the target is. But knowing that we have a low percentage, if we want to increase that, we can do a number of different things. We can improve the quality of the knowledge base to try to make sure we align the knowledge base articles with the most frequent categories that are coming in or the frequent types of incidents that are coming in. We can do an internal marketing campaign to let people know that there is this really awesome knowledge base that's available. We can have very specific targeted approaches that are, again, going to drive those business outcomes that we're looking for. And in doing so, we are going to make sure as an organization we are getting the most back on our investment. So if we've sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars into this system, we know that we're getting the usage and we know that we're getting the utilization out of it that we would expect. All right, so we've taken you through structure, very important, the journey of continual service improvement, self-service and automation. Where do you go from there? Let's say that you're doing this all today. Well, the next step, we believe, at ServiceNow, you want to start looking at benchmarking. So not only how are you doing, but how are you doing compared to other organizations, either in your industry, by size, by geography. You want to have that information to know whether or not you're actually doing a good job. You're doing a good job for your business because you're getting this insight, but really, how do you stack up to everybody else? And when you get to this level, it really is thinking about how do you compare to your peers. So one of the services that we're starting to provide here at ServiceNow is for ServiceNow customers to be able to understand what their structured process looks like, what their performance metrics are, and how they compare to the average of different customers. And we can slice and dice that, again, by industry, by geography, by age. How long have you been a ServiceNow customer, which is some level of maturity within the organization. And you really just want to start with some of the key things. And I always point people back to their process. What are the key leading and lagging indicators? What are the things that really is meaningful for them to drive the business outcomes that they're looking for? Because then you can take that information and start to look very specifically and meaningfully at the comparable figures with other organizations to see how you're doing. So these are some of the things that we can provide to ServiceNow customers. And if you happen to be a ServiceNow customer and you're interested in getting into this benchmarking type of initiative, please make sure that you check out this link. You can register. It's the first 100 qualified customers that come in and register will be eligible for the pilot program. So act now, act fast, all those other things that you see on QVC and those infomercials. Okay, So I've talked a lot of theory, and you're probably going, this is fantastic. We're getting good information on how we unlock the power of our data. This is fantastic. How does this actually translate into real results? Well, I've got a few examples for you, and it's broken down into the step 1, step 2, step 3 type of approach. So we have a number of different customers here at ServiceNow who are executing on this vision of structure, improvement, and automation. And we generally segment it into the area of data foundation, making sure that we've got the structure and the quality of the data that you need to be able to support the process. And then we go into that idea of service improvement and performance management. So one example of real-time data on demand is the idea of manual reporting. How many of you out there actually take data, export it into Excel, spend some time transforming it, put it into a PowerPoint, and then present it to your executives? I am a little bit sheepish to admit that we used to do that at ServiceNow. And we realized that this is not the way that you should structure, or this is not how you should build reports. This is not how you should be leveraging the platform. Unfortunately, this was a while ago. We wisened up within plenty of time to take advantage of the tools that we have inside our own platform. But just that kind of example, internally, we used to do that. It was 4 FTEs, 2 weeks per month. They would spend crunching reports. And then by the time that the report was ready and we got it in front of our executives, the data was stale. It's out of date. It's not actionable. And they have to go back and they do it all over again. By really unlocking the value of the data in our platform, using the reporting and the analytics tools that we have available, we internally were able to save 96 man-weeks of work per year. That's a lot of time savings. So if you're doing things like manual reporting, if you're doing things like exporting data from some type of system in order to be able to gain that insight, those are the kinds of things that you want to automate, and the structure is going to help you because that's going to modernize you, it's going to transform you, and it's going to save you a lot of work all at the same time. So be thinking about that. Once you've got that data, it's about service improvement. We have a customer that's out there. They had a business service that they were providing. They would get requests coming in from their customers, and on average, the resolution time for those requests was 3 to 5 days. They, using analytics, using a structured process and platform, they were able to get the insight that they needed, and they saw where the gaps in their process were. And in improving that process, they took the resolution time down from 3 to 5 days to 3 to 5 minutes. Think about that, the magnitude of change that they were able to make just by getting the insight that they needed and unlocking the value of their operational records and their structured process. It's huge. Last piece, performance management. So how do we make sure that people are using the system? Another customer of ours, they made a huge investment in ServiceNow. They've set up this self-service portal, and they expected everybody to come in and start using it. And they thought they were doing a fantastic job. And then they started to apply the analytics to it, and they realized that only 11% of their users were actually using this system. It was such a low number, they were absolutely shocked to find that it was that low. But because they had the data, they could then figure out through surveys what were the kinds of things that people were interested in seeing. They could implement those in the service catalog, and they could do internal marketing to let people know that, hey, this portal really does exist, and they could have a targeted campaign at those groups that were really going to benefit. And over the course of just a few months, they were able to take their system adoption from 11% to 58%, and they actually are still continuing to increase that and getting more and more adoption across their entire organization. So if you take those kinds of numbers and you apply just even simple statistical wages and times and things like that, you can potentially get savings of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, depending upon your volume, depending upon your size, everything else. But these kinds of things are not unreasonable. So not only is there value to the customer in terms of the structured, repeatable approach, there's much, much value to you as an organization to be able to improve your services, to be able to find the things to automate, and really get the return on investment that you're looking for to drive the business outcomes that you need. All right. So I am going to open up for a little bit of Q&A, and I need a minute to switch back and forth between my screens here, but I am going to take a few of your questions at this point. For more information, please make sure that you visit the ServiceNow website. I've got a couple of links on here, and you can also go to the ServiceNow community. There is a PDF version of the presentation, which includes a whole bunch of screenshots from my live demo that you can download from the BrightTalk site here, right here within the session. So let me see if I can do the things that I need to do here to get over to the presenter. And let me do that and that and that. And I think you guys should be seeing the slides. And I'm going to bring you all the way to the end. So we should be getting there in a minute. You know what? I have a really long presentation, don't I? All right. You know, rather than get to the end there, let me go directly into the questions. Okay. So the question that I have here is, you know, how real is this information? How real time is this information that you're seeing here? Well, everything that I just showed you within the demo, we've got the reporting engine and we've got performance analytics. I would say that 95% of the information is pretty much in real time. And it really depends on which specific report you're actually using or what piece of information that you're looking for. Things that were the operational reports, the interactive filters, the drilling down into the operational records, that's all real time going into the platform. The things that were related to trends, you know, the backlog versus the age of the backlog, the cost, that information, your KPIs, they're generally collected on a daily basis. So you have the score for the previous day, but you can run that collection pretty much at any time. And so you can do what we call an intraday collection, which means that you're just collecting it on an hourly, maybe every other hour, depending upon what you want to see. So in a lot of respects, the information is very, very close to real time. And that's very important in terms of driving that kind of insight and those outcomes that you're talking about, because you don't want the data to be old. You really want to see your MTTR as current as it can possibly be, because you do want to avoid those types of surprises. All right, so good question there. Another question is with respect to performance analytics on the platform, is that something that just is included in the platform, or is that something that is in addition? Well, for those of you who are ServiceNow customers, we must have a ServiceNow customer on the phone asking that question. There is what we call a standard version of performance analytics that is available with every instance of ServiceNow, and it pertains to the incident management process. So many of those KPIs that I showed you around incident management are available out of the box, and they are available as part of your ServiceNow subscription. If you want to get into the broader area of beyond incident management, change, problem, request, knowledge, all those other things I was talking about, there is a subscription upcharge to be able to take advantage of those features. Okay, so another question that I have here is, are you limited to just the information that's inside the platform, or can you drive analytics across data from multiple sources? And that's a really interesting question. And I want to be very careful in terms of how I answer it. One of the things that, so it's the idea of the business service and the process versus the classic business intelligence and data warehouse. What do you actually build? What is your architecture, and what's going to ultimately give you the insight? When you look at ServiceNow as a solution, and the fact that we are about structured communications and structured flow inside of a platform, our architecture for analytics is about how do we get the right indicators in order to make the process better, give you the insight that you need to run your business better. And by keeping the analytics in platform, just as we talked about, you're able to get to those operational records much more quickly, much more efficiently, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have all the data that you're looking for. Whereas a classic data warehouse, you're just kind of pulling all that information in from various different sources, aggregating it, and running some reports and trying to drive some insight. So going back to the original question, as a platform, we can do integration to other third-party sources. Our platform integrates with all the standards, REST, SOAP, LDAP, JDBC, everything that you want. But it's important for you to know which pieces of information that you want to pull in and what you want to have related. One of the things that we like to talk about at ServiceNow is this idea of system of record versus system of engagement. You probably are going to have authoritative sources of information like an HR system or your financial system, SAP, or whatever that happens to be. And what you're not going to want to do is to pull all that information from those various sources into your central tool, because those are your system of record. That contains a lot of confidential information, things that you don't want going to other places. But if you think about the structure, if somebody wants to request HR services, you could put that structured workflow in a platform like ServiceNow, and you could start to monitor the performance of that process related to human resources. Now, you might want to pull a few items of information from human resources, maybe some things about demographics, et cetera, that are going to come into the platform that will allow you to drive some breakdowns and understand the performance by geography or area or things like that. So you definitely want to be thinking about how you can pull some of that information in, and ServiceNow does support it. But interestingly enough, you do also want to think about what is the authoritative source, and do you actually need to put that authoritative source or take that data from the authoritative source and put it somewhere else? And we would actually advocate no in that case. Okay, so I know that we are coming to the end of time. If anybody has any other questions right now, I'm happy to hang out for another minute. Please make sure that you do submit your questions if you have them. Otherwise, I hope that you found this hour valuable. I hope that you learned a little bit about leading and lagging indicators, structured communication, and then turning those operational records into something meaningful and insightful for all of your stakeholders so that they can make sure that they're aligned in the actions and the business outcomes within the organization. So with that, I don't see any other questions. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you and, well, I guess speak at you on another Bright Talk presentation sometime in the future. Thank you so much for your time.